Freedom Drop by Brian Silverman. Narrated by Adam James Connor. Then. She hugged the child tightly to her chest as she ran. The light from the eastern sky was just beginning to brighten her way through the trees. Besides the sound of her heavy breathing, she could hear their faint calls in the distance and the sound of the dogs. They were getting closer. Reviens! Arrête! Retournez l'enfant! She knew the language. They said they would not harm her or the child. They wanted her to return, to bring the child back to them. But she could never do that. She had planned this ever since her daughter was born, and she saw her fair skin and her green eyes. She knew what would happen. She would never let them take her baby. The others told her what she had to do to escape. She could not stop. She could not look back. She had long limbs and ran fast. She was almost there, at the place where so many others had run to. She burst through the heavy brush, and the sky opened up in front of her. The sun was rising just above the blue sea beyond. She was told to run into the sky, to jump into it. That was the way. That was how they could both finally be free. Her feet were bloodied, but she didn't have far to go. She could hear the dogs' feverish panting behind her. She kept running. She ran into the sky, her baby against her chest, her legs still moving. Her legs continued to churn, and then she and her baby dropped, where they all dropped. Now. She was panting as she ran through the thick brush. She could hear him behind her. She could hear his labored breathing. He was calling for her. Why? She did not want this. She pushed too far this time. She knew she took too many risks, and she knew one day those risks would burn her. She reached for her phone again. She needed to text for help. She fumbled with it, and then it fell from her hands. She could sense that he was right behind her now. She stopped and looked for the phone. There was no time. He would be on her if she searched. She left the phone where it fell and kept running. She could hear him calling. He was telling her not to run, to come back, that he would not hurt her. The other man was standing at the cliff's edge. He was waiting. She saw his crooked smile. He held open his arms for her. She could run to him. The other man behind her was pleading with her, telling her not to run, to come back to him. He was weeping. He cried that he was sorry. So sorry. This made her pause. She didn't know what to do. She almost stopped, but she didn't. She kept running. Part 1. 1. Be a man. Tubby Levitt said. Those were the first words Tubby had uttered since I picked him up at his house. We were in my Jeep, and he was to my left in the passenger seat. Here on the Caribbean island of St. Pierre, a former British colony, we drove on the left side of the road. And like most roads on this small island, it was a particularly narrow one. There is very little flat land on St. Pierre, so not only for me as an ex-New Yorker was I not driving on the right side of the road, but I had to contend with oncoming vehicles while swaying down the slopes of the island's many hills and mountains. Are you asking me, or are you telling me? I asked Tubby, my eyes on the road. We were heading to St. Pierre's airport, which wasn't much more than an airstrip. I could see the small control tower ahead of us, and the blue Atlantic a few hundred yards beyond the airport's one runway. What? Tubby was surprised by my own question. To be a man. I'm not asking. And I'm not telling, he replied. Then why did you say it? He pointed to the Jeep speaker. You play that Jamaican music, reggae music all the time, but you don't know who sing them songs and such. I hear you play this song many times. The song called Be a Man. A title like that should not be forgotten. I was smiling because he was right. I didn't know the name of the song, but I should have. I had listened to it countless times and liked it, but never bothered to find out the song's title or who recorded it. I was bad with names, titles, stuff like that. I was better with faces, sounds, sensory things. You make this reggae playlist I hear you play so many times? Tubby asked. I hugged the curb, careful not to spill the Jeep into the recessed drain gutter. That would not be good for my shocks or alignment. We were almost at the airport. No. Someone I once knew made it for me a long time ago, I said. Who? I could feel his eyes on me. I thought about his question for a moment. No one you know. It doesn't matter, I said. It doesn't matter? Nope, I said with what I hoped was finality, but I knew he was staring at me. Then I heard him hiss through his teeth, the sound he made whenever I avoided his questions, whenever I was keeping something from him. When I first met Tubby, he was working part-time at the St. Pierre Yacht Club bar. I had just arrived on the island. Tubby impressed me with his charming, easygoing manner, and after I tasted his now legendary version of that famous Caribbean cocktail, the rum punch, I immediately offered him a full-time job working with me at my bar. Tubby's help getting my venture up and running was invaluable. Our different skill sets complemented each other. And that he once saved me from having my brains splattered on the bar's expensive burnished wood from a gun pressed to the back of my head by a Guyanese drug trafficker sealed the deal. Tubby wasn't only my business partner, he was the best friend I had on St. Pierre. So I was used to those hisses. They were no big thing. Before he could continue his questioning, I pulled into the airport's small carport. Then both of us got out of the Jeep and headed inside. The airport waiting area was mostly deserted. Tubby and I were man-spreading on an otherwise unoccupied row of plastic chairs facing the landing strip. We were quiet, just sitting there with our legs stretched out, staring at the little runway, when Tubby, out of nowhere, said, I hear they have traffic lights on Barbados. I nodded. I think I remember some traffic lights there, I said, having visited Barbados a few times. Some paved roads, too. But they still drive on the wrong side of them, paved or not. Tubby snorted. Wrong side for you, maybe. Why then you come to an island with bad roads and no traffic lights when you can pick any island? Why not live on an island that got those good things we don't have here? I turned to look at him. Who says those are good things? He thought about what I said and nodded in agreement. You know, I've been to Trini for Carnival when I was a young man. I saved my money from working at the quarry for 1 whole year after I finished my schooling for that trip. On Trini, Port of Spain, I see a few traffic lights too. What did you think? I asked. Didn't help the traffic much, Tubby said. Traffic lights just make more traffic, I think, I said. They never helped move traffic in New York, Tubby. That might be, but traffic bad around the harbor here, especially at the roundabout, and we have no traffic light. Maybe we need one there, he said. Could be, I said, but to be honest, I wasn't really thinking about traffic lights. I was barely listening to what Tubby was saying. I was a little anxious, and I think he understood that, so he cut me some slack. I looked at the time on my phone, and then back out the window in front of us. I could see the sharp glint of sun off the silver metal of a plane in the bright blue sky. The plane was heading toward the runway. I nudged Tubby with my elbow and pointed to the sky. She come? He asked. Yeah. The plane, a Liat ATR-42 turboprop, swerved away from the strip and out over the Caribbean Sea, and then circled back toward the runway. I watched as it broke through a few small puffy clouds, and then saw as the wheels were lowered. I stood up and went close to the window. I clenched my fists as I watched the plane descend. My palms were sweaty.